Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 8th of March of 2024. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, details, geolocations, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about Donetsk Avdiivka direction. The most important updates are coming from this territory. After a very short operational pause, the Russians made the decision to restart their offensive operation, and according to the Ukrainians, the Russians has become more active in the several areas near the city. One of the main blows of the Russians goes to the northern part of Berdichi. There, the Russians want to establish control in order to displace the defense forces in the western part of the village. In Orlivka, the Russians is pushing in the eastern part of the village in order to completely take control of it and to carrying out diversionary strikes south of Semyonovka. So the operational pause has ended and the Russians start pushing once again. During the previous few days, the Russians were regrouping, bringing more reserves, reinforcement. Probably they were trying to focus during the previous day on Krasnohorivka direction, South Donetsk direction, and when the Russians finished maybe with some task on that area, they returned back to Avdiivka. And it's not just a post or telegram messages as we like to talk, as we love to speak and discuss with you. We have today lots of geolocations confirming the further Russian progress. And let's start from Berdichi direction. We have, as you can see, 3 geolocations in this area. Let's start with the first one along Miru Street. On this video, for example, we can see the Russian soldiers of storming the positions of 47th Mechanized Brigade of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. On this video, we can see the Russian soldier who took, let's say, position on as close as possible to the surface, trying to not to get under the Ukrainian bullets or something like this. And a few moments later, we can see the Ukrainian soldiers moving further towards the Russian positions. So based on that video, we can make a conclusion that the Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to establish control and to force the Ukrainians to fall back from the territory. And according to that demarcation, this approximately the Russian control along Miru Street. Later, we got additional geolocation from Sadova Street from the southern part of the Berdichi. On this video, we can also see the Russian soldier who was trying to bring down the Ukrainian FPV drone who was hunting him. This video was geolocated exactly in this area, and this video shows that the Russians during the previous phase of the offensive operation managed to move further along the Sadova Street and to get also the central part of Berdichi. So based on that geolocation, we can also adjust the map and to show this area also under complete Russian control. We are not saying that the entire Berdichi was captured by the Russians, but obviously the Russians are getting closer and closer to the Durna River and to the first water barrier that located between the, let's say, western part of the village and the eastern part. So this is the first defense belt. This is the first water barrier that the Russians are going to reach probably by the end of the weekend. So we have geolocations that confirms the further Russian progress. Now we are moving to the south. Once again, this is the first movement and this is the second progress of the Russian armed forces. Now we're moving to Orlovka because we have additional updates from the territory as well. We got a lot of geolocations, and mainly the most geolocations are coming from Bratov-Paukovых Street. As you can see, there are 3 geolocations. On this video, for example, we can see the video was published by the Ukrainian sources. The use of JDAM, or probably it's JDAM, it was JDAM, yes, it was JDAM, and as a result of strike, the temporary positions of Russian forces was damaged and probably destroyed, and the Ukrainians were trying to reduce to ruins the edge Russian forces position, or this is the high-rise building in comparison with the other buildings in this area that the Russians were using for communication center, for let's say radars, for FPV drone equipment or something like this. And on this video, for example, we can see the Russian personnel carrier was moving along the streets from the eastern part to the western part, and this personnel carrier was attacked and damaged by the Ukrainian FPV drone. If we return back to the map, the video shown us the following situation. The Russians were moving along the street. When they reached this intersection road, the Ukrainians attacked the armored vehicle with FPV drone, and after that the video stopped. So we don't know for sure what was the next, but obviously the Russians were moving further to the western part, and that video tell us and give us some understanding and some, let's say, not that a strict confirmation, but some confirmation that very likely the Russians managed to establish complete control over this territory, and we do have possibilities using the video to adjust the map, maybe not for the entire this territory, but probably we can, let's say, use the half of the street under Russian control. Furthermore, according to some mappers, the Russians continue their movements to the south of Orlovka with the purpose to establish control or to half encircle, and not just to half encircle, but to completely fix the issues and the problems of the village by the name of Tonenke. So this is the approximately the further additional Russian progress from Orlovka to the south of Tonenke. And when talking about Tonenke itself, we have few videos. For example, on this video, we can see the Russian soldiers moving and entering the farms. We see the group of Russian soldiers moving along the ruins, along the farms, and the Ukrainians were FPV droning the Russians, which also confirms the further Russian progress. So we can't tell for sure whether the Russians managed to establish control over these farms or whether the Russians managed to enter the central street and to capture this territory, but we can tell for sure that as a result of clashes and assault operation during the previous few days, the Russians managed to establish control over the territory, because we have geolocated video of how the Russians were entering the territory. So we see the Russians are moving, and these attacks, all those attacks, these progress, these advances tell us first of all that Ukrainians are about to lose this defense belt, to fall back from the last part of Tonenke, to fall back from Orlovka, and of course to fall back from Berdichi. Furthermore, when talking about Berdichi, today we got the second cemetery, the second Bradley Square in the vicinity of the Abrams Avenue. I'll remind you that Abrams Avenue is located in the eastern part of Berdichi, and the second, let's say, Bradley Square is located in the intersection of Kasberova Street and Central Street on the northern part of Berdichi. Furthermore, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians were bombing Semyonovka. This is the main logistic area, the main logistic hub of Ukrainian forces that connected two towns, Orlovka and Berdichi, and the Ukrainians used this territory to redeploy forces from one side to another, but this area is also under the complete Russian control, and currently the Ukrainians are losing their, let's say, their focus in this area, they are losing their logistic, they are losing their central commanders commanding in this area, and obviously very soon the Ukrainians will be forced to fall back from the territory as well. Furthermore, when talking about Donetsk direction, today the Ukrainian sources published the video of new type of guided bombs. The Russians improved their guided bombs. Recently they were using just a small model that like wings for the guided bombs, which allowed them to increase the distance of use of this type of weapon, and now the Ukrainians published the video, the photos showing us the new type of Russian guided bombs, FAB 20550, and the Russians also added a small engine to the guided bombs, which also increased the distance of the use of this type of weapon. So the Russians probably found something interesting during the special military operation, and obviously during the next days they're going to improve this weapon. They will try to increase the distance of this weapon as much as possible, and of course in some way this will also reduce the Russian losses among the aviation and increase the Russian superiority in the sky. On this video we see another attack of FPV drone against the Ukrainian positions in the vicinity of the village by the name of Umanskaya. So we can say that the days of Ukrainians in this area are numbered, and sooner or later they will be forced to fall back. When talking about Peromaiskaya direction, according to the Russians, they have additional progress in the fields without any geolocations. The clashes are very heavy. And once again, I'll remind you that the main Russian goal is to enter and to capture the village by the name of Karlovka. And if the Russians are able to establish control over the village by the name of Karlovka, then they will be able to continue their offensive operation further in direction of Selidova. The Russians will be able to attack Kurakhova from the north, and the Russians will be able to attack Ocheretino from the south. So the Russians chose the shortest way for establishing complete superiority over the territory. If you take a look at the near rear of Avdiivka direction, we can find significant number of icons with bombs. During the previous 24 hours, the Russians conducted significant number of strikes with artillery, with missiles, with ballistic missiles. The Russians are saying that they damaged and destroyed some coal mines, some agricultural warehouses, villages, some territories of agricultural enterprises, some farms, some barracks, and so on. We have a lot of geolocations, and we have some results. Furthermore, the sources reported that during the previous 24 hours, the Ukrainians, as a result of friendly fire, by mistake brought down their own MiG-29, and this situation took place on Avdiivka direction. Very likely the Ukrainians discovered their own air defense system, and very likely the Russians will destroy this air defense system very soon. Also, the Russians continue improvements of their weapon, of their drones. Today we got additional report from the Ukrainian sources. On this video, for example, we can see the drone with optic cable spool on a drone. This optic cable spool has a distance of 10 kilometers, and the Russians are using this optic cable spool to reduce any effects from electronic warfare equipment that Ukrainians use. And obviously the Ukrainians says if the Russians are going to use this optic cable spool, they have no chances to suppress the Russian drones. And the most important, the Russians, it's 10 kilometers long. So imagine yourself, the Russians can attack the Ukrainians within a distance of 10 kilometers with drones. It's a very big distance. First of all, it will increase this survivability of the Russian soldiers, of the Russian FPV drone operators in comparison of the Ukrainians, because when talking about the regular situation, either the Russians and the Ukrainians can use drones maybe in 2, maybe 3 kilometers from the line of combat contact, from the area of strike, and obviously this is significantly not so much. And either the Russians and the Ukrainians always, as soon as they see drones in the sky, first of all they start hunting the FPV drones operators. And this special military operation shown us that exactly the FPV drones operators is the most important asset in every single army. Now we are moving to Marinka direction. The Russians continue offensive and storming operation of Krasnohorivka. During the previous 24 hours, we haven't received any other updates or about the further Russian progress. The clashes are taking place in the village, in the residential part of the southern part. During the previous days, the Russians managed to improve their positions, to establish control over Ukrainian positions along the railways. So everything just in the messages and telegram reports without any proofs on the ground. The only thing we need to mention that according to the European countries and European analytics, West analytics, the Russians started production of FAP 1500 massively. So mass production launched in Russia, and the latest videos in Krasnohorivka confirms this information. And just to understand, FAP 1500 is probably the game changer, and with the guided bombs, and not just with the guided bombs but also with the small engines on board, can change the entire, let's say, not just change, everything has been already changed a long time ago. It can just speed up the progress of the Russian armed forces. When talking about the southern Georgievka direction, today the Russian sources published additional videos of how they were bombing and attacking the Ukrainian positions to the south of Georgievka and to the west of Pobeda, which confirms that after the Russians managed to dig in deeper and to clear the situation around Pobeda, they start moving further to the west. On this video we can see a short artillery preparation with 12 flamethrower systems. As a result of those strikes, the Russians managed to damage and to destroy a few armored vehicles and personnel carriers. A few soldiers also were captured as a result of fire. So the Russians start preparation for further movements to the west. The video took place here, so with this video confirms about Russian plans to move in this direction and to start the battle for the main defense belt between Georgievka and, let's say, Pobeda. This is the main defense belt. We haven't received anything from Novomikhailovka, just one video how the Ukrainians try to evacuate wounded soldiers from the village and to replace them by the fresh soldiers, but the Russians controlled the entire situation. And when they saw the Ukrainian, let's say, personnel carrier arrived in this area, they basically destroyed this personnel carrier, and they didn't give the Ukrainians even a single chance for evacuation of the wounded and replacing them with the fresh forces. So we can say for 100% there is a real operational encirclement. The Ukrainians don't have any chances to evacuate and to move forces from the area during night period of time, during the daylight. So this also confirms that very soon the Ukrainians will be forced to fall back from the village towards Konstantinovka. We haven't received anything from Ugledar, from Velika Novoselovka area. We have some additional updates from Robotyne. The clashes for the village are very heavy. The sources are saying that during the previous 24 hours, the Russians conducted few offensive operations on the western part of the village. These reports were received in the morning, and somewhere in the second part of the day, the Russians started or reported about another offensive operation, another attempts to attack the village from the eastern part. And as I understand, according to the reports on the ground, the Russians Russians managed to achieve certain results, certain progress. Very likely tomorrow we're going to receive more updates. Furthermore, during those attacks, the Russians, as you can see, published significant number of videos of FPV drone strikes against the Ukrainian forces along the main supply road between Novodanilovka and Robotyne. During the previous 24 hours, the Ukrainians tried to send as many as possible forces, let's say, to replace wounded, to get some reserves, reinforcement, but all those soldiers, all those waves of help was discovered by the Russians and destroyed as a result of FPV drone strikes. So the battle for Robotyne is also coming to an end. So this is the situation. The roads are under complete control. Robotyne appeared in something like artillery pocket, FPV drone pocket. The Russians are storming this area from many regions, from many territories, from many areas, and Ukrainians don't have chances for evacuation, rotation, and many other different things. When talking about Bakhmut Artyomov's direction during the previous 24 hours, and not just during the previous 24 hours, but fourth or third day in a row, we haven't received anything about the progress of the Russian forces in Ivanovska. Just I would like to point your attention. You can go through any of blogger or military expert or any mapper, and you will see that nobody says anything about Ivanovska for the previous 3 days. I can't tell you what is all this about, why the Russians stopped talking about the territory. Maybe the Ukrainians managed to bring some reinforcement. Maybe the Russians, let's say, currently are facing a very strong wall of Ukraine defense. Maybe the Russians made a decision to make operational posts. I can't tell you, but we stopped receiving anything from the village. Obviously, sooner or later we're gonna start receiving more updates, but for now, this is the situation about this territory. Now we're moving further to Sivers's direction. The Russians continue offensive operation inside of Bilogorovka, and the Russians continue bombing and attacking the Ukrainian positions between Siversk and Bilogorovka, trying to destroy the main supply roads. So the Russians control everything, and the Ukrainians also in this direction have less chances to conduct successful rotations and evacuations and support of their forces. Terny, we haven't received anything during the day, just some telegram posts about storming of Terny from the north, and we have one video of Russian Lancet strike against the Ukrainian tank in the vicinity of Yampolovka. On this video we can see the Russians attacking the Ukrainian personnel carrier or tank. This video confirms, let's say, the edge positions and the territory of Ukraine control. So it's very good to receive at least something. This video doesn't show us any progress, but at least it shows us that where the Ukrainian tanks are moving and where the Russians are attacking them with Lancet. When talking about north and Kupyansk direction, we haven't received anything. Kharkiv area, another FAB arrived in the territory, another warehouse was discovered by the Russians and destroyed. One FAB arrived a little bit to the left, then another FAB arrived exactly to the target, and the entire barrack was, let's say, raised to the skies and completely destroyed. Of course, when talking just one about this video, it's very difficult to understand about the situation, but if we increase the numbers of days since the beginning of March, it will give us a better understanding of the situation. A lot of FABs, a lot of artillery strikes, a lot of Krasnohorivka, so the Russians continue step by step reducing the Ukrainian defense possibilities. But if we increase the numbers of days since the beginning of February, then we're gonna receive a better understanding, a significant number of strikes, a lot of reports about the evacuation, a significant number of reports about, let's say, I don't know, reconnaissance operations, sabotage operations, the villages on the line between Budarki, Mykolaievka, Varvarovka, or let's say Volokhovka, Vovchansk. As you can see, every single village along this road was under very heavy fire. This is the first defense belt of the Ukrainians on this territory, and the Russians are reducing the Ukrainians' defense possibilities with the purpose to start some offensive at some day and to collapse the entire defense belt with one attack. Obviously, this is going to take place very soon. And now we are moving to Kiev. We have a lot of updates from the territory, from Kiev, from, let's say, global Ukrainian updates. And the most important, as we discussed, the Zelensky signed a decree on the demobilization of conscript in April-May. And for now, as we discussed, for many reasons, to hide the real losses, to replace with new soldiers, and to force those who will return back from the line of combat contact, force them to mobilize new forces. Lots of, let's say, purposes. But when talking about mobilization, Today we got a lot of videos about that. On this video, for example, we can see from Lvov how the Ukrainians basically during the daylight kidnapped another guy on the street and put him into the cart, and probably they sent him right to Avdiivka or to Sinkovka. And the same area, the same day, 3 other Ukrainian officers kidnapped people just during the daylight. The man was walking probably to get some flowers to his girlfriend, because today is International Women's Day, but they captured him and sent him to Avdiivka as well. On this video, for example, we can see how the Ukrainian horsemen with the axes and knives and swords were fighting with Ukrainian officers, and probably these are the only guys who made some attempts to fight for their freedom and just basically to fight for their lives. But later we got reports that the Ukrainian police authorities start hunting them. That first man was already captured. Those who was on horse was already captured by the Ukrainians, and the second one in the yellow car still hiding from the Ukrainian authorities, but very likely he will be captured as well. And on the Romanian border, on the Moldovan border, the Ukrainians managed to capture significant number of the Ukrainians. As you can see, they're kicking them and they're beating them. Mans were trying to leave Ukraine. There were 34 people trying to escape to Moldova, were caught by the special forces of Ukraine, and on the border guards, every single one of them paid around 10,000 euro to leave Ukraine, but all of them were captured, and very likely they are already somewhere in Avdiivka dying under the Russian FAB 1500 strikes. Significant information, significant updates, and I can't understand why the Ukrainians are still doing this, why they still support Zelensky, why they can't basically stop the special military operation and stop dying in favor of interest not even of Ukrainian population. Furthermore, we got some details and updates about the Russian missile strikes in Odessa, and today, according to confirmed reports, the Russians destroyed very important radar that Ukrainians were using to control and to track Russian missiles in the area. Furthermore, if you remember, we got some updates that Zelensky planned to visit Turkey, and we were saying that Zelensky probably wants to start negotiation process with Erdogan, not with Erdogan, with Russia, but through Erdogan. And today we got updates that he will visit. Later we got update that he entered Turkey, but according to final update, we got the video how Zelensky was in the port, and the Turkish finished the building of combat battleship for Zelensky. And as we can see, he has plans to establish complete superiority in the Black Sea, so we'll see what is going to be. And another important thing about the situation is that the Western countries and Western embassies in Moscow announced to avoid large gatherings over the next 48 hours due to possible terrorist attacks in this area. So for now, nothing terrible, nothing bad happens in the area, but who knows what is going to be in the end of the day or during the next few days. And it's the most important update that France, very difficult to understand what Macron is talking about, but some sources are saying that France is going to send troopers into Ukraine. Some sources are saying that he's not going. But today we got the next piece of news that France will send troops into Ukraine if there is a breakthrough of the front towards Odessa or Kiev, Macron said today. And this is exactly what we was talking during the previous few days. First of all, France is going to have some forces of the fast reaction somewhere in Moldova, and if there are risk of lose Odessa, they will try to move their forces to the town and to establish control and not to allow the Russians to capture. So this is the plan, and we'll see whether this is going to happen or not. And that's it for today. Military Summer Channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.